It's now time to begin our service of installation. I hope you all brought your toolkits. You had to make that joke. It had to be done. So we'd like to begin by welcoming two very special close friends and mentors of Rabbi Morrison, Rabbi Ron Friedman, who was Rabbi Emeritus of Temple Israel of Boston, and Rabbi Bernard Melman, the Senior Scholar of Temple Israel of Boston. They'll be offering some words of blessing and charge to Rabbi Morrison.
So let us test. Can you hear this one?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Up more? Or north side?
Got it. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Baruch Hanimtzaim. Greetings to all present with us in this sanctuary and those who have joined us electronically for this exceptional celebration in the life of Congregation Bet Am.
We're honored to be here as this community installs Rabbi Jeremy Morrison as its senior rabbi after the protracted delay imposed upon us by COVID-19.
We are particularly delighted to be reunited with our esteemed colleagues, your rabbis emeriti, Janet Martyr and Rick Block, extraordinary leaders of our reform movement, and your cantor emerita, Kay Greenwald. We remember tonight, too, Beth Am's founding rabbi of blessed memory, Sidney Axelrad.
After having had the opportunity to worship with your marvelous clergy from a virtual distance, we're thrilled to meet Rabbis Prosnit and Wanamaker, Cantor Spall, and we think Rabbi Weissman virtually, now the others face-to-face, and to be introduced to your Executive Director, Rachel Tash, and your Director of Educational Learning and Educational Innovation, Sarah Lowing.
President Hirsch, it is a pleasure to meet you, and past President Chang, how wonderful to be reconnected with you through the miracle of live streaming. We are permitted to add greeting to Jeremy's many friends back in Boston who have joined us for this great celebration.
Before we begin our actual remarks, permit us to share a story about Jeremy that's unknown to any one of you, one that will illustrate his compassionate nature. Shortly before the Morrisons moved from Boston to the Bay Area, Jeremy stopped at our local Whole Foods store. He needed to pick up some milk and 4 apples. He noticed that this elderly woman with a full basket kept looking at him as he walked down the aisles. When he got to the cashier, she was right in front of him. She glanced back at him and said, "Pardon me, I'm sorry if my staring at you has made you feel uncomfortable. It's just that you look so much like my son, who recently moved from Brookline to Hong Kong." "You must be sad," Jeremy replied. "Is there anything I can do for you?" "Yes," she said, "as I'm leaving, can you just say, 'Goodbye, Mother'? It would make me feel ever so much better." Jeremy replied with a gracious smile, "Sure, I'd be happy to do that." As she was almost out the door, Jeremy waved and called out, "Goodbye, Mother." Then he stepped up to the cashier who said, "That'll be $127.34. "How can that be, Jeremy?" asked her. "I only bought a half-gallon of milk and 4 apples." "Yeah," said the cashier, "but your mother said that you would pay for her."
Now that we've relaxed all of you, let us first establish our bona fides for the role to which we have been assigned this evening. They derive from the immortal words of J.K. Simons for Farmers Insurance. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Our relationship with your new rabbi, Rabbi Morrison, began in 1978 when he was 7 years old, and we were the new rabbis at Temple Israel in Boston. Jeremy was a 5th-generation member of Temple Israel. He shares that status with his brother Robert, Jeremy's mother Peggy, who's here tonight, and his father, Alan Morrison, Alav HaShalom, were among our first friends and partners as we sought to bring a great community into its next era. Our lives are intricately intertwined with Jeremy, Molly, Zeke, and Poppy. Simply stated, they are part of our families of choice. Our relationship with Jeremy is suffused not only with our love for him, but also with a love for Torah that we share. So perhaps that is the perfect place for us to begin.
We'd like to focus our attention a la Sesame Street on 2 words of the day. The first is makom, taken from this week's Torah portion. The second is panim, from next week's parashah, and then connect them to Congregation Betham, your new senior rabbi, and your future together. Conveniently, in translation, our 2 words rhyme. They are place and face. In the second verse of this week's Torah reading, we learn that Jacob happened almost accidentally upon a place, makom. In this dusky moment between light and dark, at the very border between his homeland and the unknown, in what appears to be just any place, Jacob lies down to sleep. And as he dreams, the deeper import of this makom, this place, is revealed. In this liminal moment, Jacob is shaken from his self-absorption. Suddenly, he becomes aware of another dimension. He is transformed by an ineluctable power. This makom place of transformation he names Beit El, God's house. What does the Torah teach us about the significance of makom place in our lives? Is it not that each of us needs to find the place in which to transform ourselves as well as a place that we might transform?
Permit us to highlight some of the transformations that we have witnessed in Jeremy in the makom place that we shared with him for 40 years. Remember, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. For some young people, it takes a long time to make a public stand on strongly held moral convictions. Not true of Jeremy. As a 17-year-old junior in high school, he campaigned vigorously to be included among a small group of Temple Israel members to go on the Temple's annual visit to Soviet Jewish refuseniks to encourage prisoners of hope in 3 Russian cities. His vigorous involvement in the preparations indicated that he held strong convictions about the mission and was determined to be a full partner in our endeavor. This trip had become for Jeremy an awakening in which he realized that he had a personal, moral responsibility for other Jews. He understood that this meant that he had to put down his own body on the line. He was compelled by the call to personal action and determined to engage in the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuyim, the redemption of Jews in captivity.
An artist doesn't look at a blank canvas and see a void. A sculptor doesn't confront a block of granite or a felled tree trunk and see mere stone or wood. In each case, those blessed with creative genius, those perceive those objects as media that invite, even demand, their imaginative dreams. We are well acquainted with your new rabbi's visionary genius, with his capacious imagination and his masterful ability to bring dreams to fruition. When I returned to Temple Israel to succeed Bernard as the senior rabbi, Jeremy, then in his last year at HUC, visited me with a proposal. He wanted to forego an ordinary assistantship and return to the synagogue that he called home in order to create something that did not exist. He recognized quite correctly that the majority of young Jews in their 20s and 30s were not to be found within the walls of our liberal American congregations. He argued that unless we were prepared to lose a generation, we needed to experiment. If we recognized that we had a threshold issue, we had to expand our boundaries and radically reconceive both our program and our means of engagement. His arguments were persuasive, his vision compelling. One by one, he engaged with our leadership, fanning enthusiasm, patiently overcoming skepticism, evidencing a willingness to take enormous personal risks at the very outset of his rabbinic career. Permission was granted, but the leash was very short. The Riverway Project, named for the Boulevard Street on which Temple Israel is located, was then born.
Immediately, Jeremy began meeting with folks in their 20s and 30s, singles and couples, young Jews and their interfaith partners, heterosexual and GLBTQ. He met one-on-one in small groups, in homes and bookstores, coffee shops and bars, created alternative ritual experiences, social gatherings, and study sessions in a variety of venues, thus expanding the walls of our synagogue. He listened and he refined, he engaged, and he built internal leadership in thoughtful ways. He connected the community that had begun to cohere to aspects of our existing synagogue programs and to his clergy partners as well. In a few short years, the Riverway Project became a model for our national movement. After 9 years, as the director of the Riverway Project, Jeremy felt that he was aging out of the target population, that we needed to plan for succession. As we were discussing next steps, Temple Israel needed to find a new director of education. As you'll discover, your new rabbi has something in common with our famous senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. He always has a plan. He began to discuss with us a comprehensive version of Temple Israel's program in Jewish education. From elementary through adult education, he offered to take over that role, and we eagerly accepted.
In short, during his next tenure, He engaged the various stakeholders and communities in the work of revisioning and redesigning all our programs for kids, for teens, for adult learners, and adding to our offerings a dynamic program of peer education for our increasing population of elder learners, modeled after the lifelong learning initiatives of Harvard and Brandeis. In every program that he touched, he created a collaborative body eager to share his commitment to building caring communities which promoted enhanced Jewish learning and living.
When we think of the home in which Jeremy Morrison was nurtured, three elements come immediately to mind: music, literature, and an openness to inquiry and learning. Jeremy's work was plentiful and fulfilling, yet he knew inside himself well enough to realize that he had to deepen his own learning in order to become a still better rabbi. Jeremy enrolled at the Harvard Divinity School on his weekly day off, and there he continued his own personal intellectual journey. That led him to become a PhD candidate in Bible at Brandeis University, also completed on Wednesdays. Jeremy was supported by his wife Molly and encouraged by his colleagues as he forged his path. In the course of his 15-year endeavor, Jeremy's spirit may have flagged from time to time, but with resolve, he persevered despite many competing life challenges.
In next week's parashah, as Jacob anticipates his return from exile and his subsequent confrontation with Esau, you'll remember that he engages in a wrestling match with a mysterious assailant. This episode, too, takes place at a liminal moment between darkness and light, on the banks of a river which forms the border with his native land.
After the struggle, the Torah tells us that Jacob named the place Peniel and declared, "For I have seen God, panim el panim, face to face." The full import of this transformation is not realized until the next scene, when Jacob comes face to face with his brother Esau. It is Esau's gracious and loving reception of him that prompts Jacob to exclaim, "Ra'iti panecha, kerot panei Elohim." To see your face is like seeing the face of God. That marks the most important moment in which Jacob discerns the divine in human relations. What does the Torah teach us about the significance of the word panim, the word face? Is it not that the divine inheres in every genuine human encounter? As Martin Buber has written, when two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, God is the electricity that surges between them.
The ability of a person to embody this idea is often discovered in his acts that go almost unnoticed, that never appear on his curriculum vitae. Jeremy had clearly become the rabbi for our younger adult population. Increasingly, he was approached by folks in need of various types of counseling. One of these was a young woman. I'll call her Jenny, and note that was not her real name. She was relatively new to Boston, beginning her career, when she was suddenly beset by a series of devastating physical illnesses that sent her repeatedly to the hospital. She confided in Jeremy that she had nowhere to turn for support, that her relationships with her biological family had been strained for years, that she had been attracted to the Riverway Project in the hope of meeting new friends, and that her sudden and extensive physical trials left her bereft. During that period of time, Jeremy acted as a primary support, conveying to her that she mattered, connecting her to professional help, seeing beyond her loneliness, her neediness, and her illness, recognizing in her the image of God before his eyes as he provided empathy and compassion.
Remember, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. And one of the important things that we know is that the past is prologue. What happens when a committed, visionary, scholarly, and compassionate rabbi encounters an engaged, caring, and dynamic community? We think we know that answer. As your eyes meet his eyes in this place, as you are, God willing, brought increasingly together, panim el panim, face to face with him, together you will expand, explore, and embody the implications and the promise of both Beit El and Peniel, affirming your home at Bet Am as God's place because its inhabitants reflect God's face.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Friedman and Rabbi Melman. Now I'd like to invite up our president, Jay Hirsch. One of these gentlemen referred to as President Hirsch, and we don't use that enough. So I think we should use that much more, President Hirsch. And we'd also like to invite up Rabbi Emeritus Rick Block to join us on the bima. In a moment, we're also going to be opening the Ark, but I invite you to remain seated if you like. I know it feels a little unusual, but keep your seats for now.
Rabbi Morrison, Jeremy, on behalf of our emeritus clergy, it is a great honor and a privilege to speak words of blessing to you this evening. As you know, there is in our Siddur, our prayer book, a special blessing for the passing of Torah at a bar or bat mitzvah. It's on my mind because I'll be speaking it to our beloved grandson next Shabbat. And it goes like this. Into our hands, O God, you placed your Torah to be held high by parents and children and taught by one generation to the next. Whatever has befallen us, our people have remained steadfast in loyalty to the Torah. It was carried into exile in the arms of parents so their children might not be deprived of their birthright. And now the prayer continues. I pray that you will always be worthy of this inheritance, take its teaching into your heart, and in turn pass it on to your children and those who come after you. May you be a faithful Jew, searching for wisdom and truth, working for justice and peace. Thus will you be among those who labor to bring nearer the day when God shall be one and God's children shall be one. This prayer, it seems to me, teaches us that a Sefer Torah, a scroll of the Torah, is vastly more than the sum of its sacred contents. It embodies the hopes and dreams and aspirations, the mission of the Jewish people, and our 4 millennium-long journey from Abraham and Sarah to this place, to this evening, to this service, and to this moment, a momentous and world-changing journey. Bar mitzvah, bark mitzvah. And I think it's fair to say that that journey was possible and the survival and flourishing of the Jewish people was possible only because of 100 generations of rabbis who taught and led and comforted and challenged our people, and sweet singers of Israel who gave voice to the aspirations, the hopes and dreams and longings of our people in prayer and in music. You know, I'm sure, I know you know, the famous midrash that the soul of every Jew who would ever be was gathered at Mount Sinai when the Torah was given to Moses. And I think it's also true that on occasions such as this, the soul of every rabbi who ever was and will ever be is spiritually present with us. And it is in that spirit that I have the pleasure of passing on this Torah into your loving and strong arms. It's my hope and prayer for you and my confidence that you will be a blessing and that you will be abundantly blessed. And we look forward to your long and fulfilling career as our senior rabbi as you lead this sacred congregation from strength to strength. Mazel tov. God bless you.
I invite you now to open your pamphlets to the blessing, and you can also direct your attention to the screen where we have the words of the blessing we're about to begin. From generation to generation, Congregation Beth Am has survived and thrived due to the devotion of our leaders who have led us with Torah in their midst. As we now install Rabbi Jeremy S. Morrison as our senior rabbi, we turn to our past presidents and to rise and begin.
We represent this rich heritage of this community. As Judaism teaches, our past is just not past history, it is memory. We enter into this world with full embrace of the blessings of our past. We cherish the spirits of those who are no longer with us and the chapters of our great that has brought us to the present. Rabbi Morrison, with great embrace of our heritage and the holy work of transforming memory into blessing.
Our heritage is in my heart. In full acknowledgement of those who came before me, I commit myself to the work of transforming memory into blessing.
As the Board of Directors, we serve our community through sacred governance, striving to make responsible decisions to guarantee that Congregation Beth Am is and continues to be a shelter of peace to all who enter and a beacon of light in the broader community. Rabbi Morrison, will you help us to lead this community with Torah in our midst?
With Torah in my arms, yes, I am fully devoted to grounding our decisions in our sacred texts and uplifting our leaders to follow its wisdom and vision.
We are with you. On behalf of our entire staff, as your partners, we are committed to our shared vision. Rabbi Morrison, will you guide us, support us, and lead us in our service to the congregation?
Yes, I am wholeheartedly committed to leading you in our sacred work. I will partner with you, I will offer you encouragement, and I will challenge you to promote your growth.
Now I invite all of our beloved congregation to rise and speak as one. We, Congregation Beth Am, find meaning and purpose in our sacred community. Together we live in Jewish time, separating the holy from the mundane and celebrating our rich tradition. We mark the seasons of our lives, the joy and the sorrow, through the rituals and customs of our people. Rabbi Morrison, will you celebrate with us in times of joy and mourn with us in times of sorrow? Will you lead us in our mission to practice
Yes, I will be with you in times of joy and sorrow. Together we will practice a Judaism that is alive, relevant, and meaningful.
We build community and encounter holiness through relationships. We embrace the Torah in all its dimensions as our enduring source for inquiry, discovery, and inspiration. We explore spirituality and innovate our traditions of ritual and prayer. We pursue justice and partnerships with others to realize our mission of the world as ought to be. Rabbi Morrison, will you be our teacher, our spiritual leader, and our moral guide? Will you help us build meaningful relationships rooted in the values of our traditions?
I accept this role as teacher, spiritual leader, and moral guide, and I invite you to be my teachers. While in this position, I will respect you, have patience with you, and encourage you to grow. I am devoted to our mission to live as a holy community whose study and practice of Judaism inspires and challenges us to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with our God. Congregation Beth Am will be a community in which all people feel seen and known. Together, we will pursue justice and shine light upon our world.
We now joyfully install you as our senior rabbi with the sacred words of our ancestors. May God bless and protect you. May God's light shine upon you with grace and kindness. May God's presence surround you and your family and bring you wholeness, love, and peace.
Please be seated. First of all, I just need to thank you all for coming and for everyone who has joined us online to make the time to be together with us on this evening of celebration. And I want to thank all of you who are present for overcoming any hesitancies about entering this sanctuary on this evening. We've been through a lot together during the past year and a half, and it means a great deal that you would come to celebrate what has been, for me, a long-anticipated gathering. So I thank you. When I saw that this Shabbat of my installation coincided with our reading of the story of Jacob, I was excited, and perhaps for one central reason. Like Jacob, I am a younger brother. And this might be why, deep in my lizard brain, and early on in my life, I formed an unconscious connection to the intergenerational familial epic told in Genesis, across the Torah, and throughout the Bible that often focuses on younger brothers as the heroes of our mythic stories. Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Solomon, David, all younger brothers. Consistently, they start with little. Societally in the ancient Near East, the cards were stacked against younger brothers. And yet, in the origin stories of Judaism, the younger brother gains authority and prestige. And then, when I learned that my older brother Robert had sweetly decided to join us for this weekend, I was even more excited. For my older brother to sit and watch as I, his younger, slightly shorter brother, was installed as senior rabbi of Congregation Beth Am in Los Altos Hills, that was going to be a dream come true. Sadly, in the end, Robert couldn't be with us this weekend. But he, in a particular way, played an important role in my becoming a rabbi. More on that in a moment. Of all of the younger brothers that are biblical heroes, only one dreams in a temple, Jacob. In this week's Torah portion, as you've already heard, Jacob dreams while in a temple, Beit El. You know the story. Running from his brother, Jacob comes upon a certain place and stops there for the night because the sun has set. He takes a stone, puts it under his head, and lies down to sleep. Taking note of this unusual choice for a pillow, Robert Alter wrote that Jacob never met a stone that he didn't want to wrestle. He rolls stones off of the mouths of wells. He sleeps on stones. He makes pacts with stones. Stones are a powerful metaphor for Jacob's lifelong predilection to contend with difficult and seemingly unyielding obstacles and challenges. So there in a temple, with a rock as a pillow, Jacob dreams. He dreams of a ramp, a sulam, stretching from the ground to the sky, divine messengers ascending and descending upon it. In the dream, God stands next to Jacob and makes pretty much the same promise to him that God had made to Abraham and Isaac. I will be with you wherever you go. I will not leave you. I will fulfill my promise to you. And then Jacob woke up. I spoke of this scene in February of 2020, on the day when we formally entered into a relationship with one another as a congregation and a new senior rabbi. Ma nora hamakom hazeh, va'anochi lo yadati. These are two of Jacob's expressions of wonderment, of discovery, when he awoke from his slumber at Bethel. I echoed his words when I stood on this bimah on one of the last Sundays in the before times. How awesome is this place? And I didn't know. Now I know. 20 months later, I now know just how awesome is this place, Beth Am. How awe-inspiring our synagogue truly is. During these past 20 months, I have experienced repeatedly a sense of discovery and wonderment when I have encountered Beth Am's commitment to learning, our community's profound capacity to care for each other, and its willingness to innovate, to contend with unforeseen challenges, such as an ongoing, seemingly unyielding worldwide pandemic. As a child of the 70s and 80s, growing up in Brookline, Massachusetts, calling something awesome, or even better, wicked awesome, was high praise. Ma nora hamakom hazeh, V'achshav ani yodea. I now know you, Betham, and you're wicked awesome. During the past 20 months, through working together to overcome so many challenges, we have been able to discover more of each other's facets as we continue to build trust with one another. And here we now are, Betham, alive, grateful to be together, celebrating this joyful Shabbat, celebrating our relationship. This is a night for us to be like Jacob and to dream in our temple. I grew up in a synagogue where I could dream. Temple Israel of Boston was a place for dreaming. My elders, Rabbi Bernard Mellman, Rabbi Ron Friedman, Irene Friedman, Cantor Roy Einhorn, my mother and father, my brother, they engaged in a never-ending transformative process of repurposing the stones of the synagogue that they had inherited into a sanctuary where a new generation could dream. And I don't mean dreams of unicorns, or a dream of how maybe one day what would become a 5-foot, 8-inch tall white Jewish man could dunk a basketball. No, not those kinds of dreams. In the synagogue, I learned of reality-based dreaming, of envisioning what a Jewish community and the world at large could become, and the efforts needed to fulfill those dreams. And I first became engaged in this ongoing process of innovation, of transformation, through watching my older brother Robert when he was our youth group's president. It was watching him that I first saw close up the level of commitment, the detailed handiwork that it takes to get a Jewish community built right. The synagogue in which I was raised was a sanctuary for dreaming, for innovation, and perhaps most powerfully, it was a place of blessing. Through an ever-expanding web of human relationships anchored in the synagogue, and that grew to encompass Cantor Jody Suffren and Rabbis Bethy Miller and Matt Soffer, I have experienced what I perceive to be God's grace. Our honored guests who are here tonight personify for me what God promised to Jacob when he was dreaming in Beit El. These are the individuals who, over the course of my life, have been with me wherever I go. They have never left me. On this night, to have these beloved friends and family here, together with all of you, Betham, it is truly a dream come true. Here's a remarkable midrash about Jacob and his stonework, a midrash in which God blesses innovation. It goes like this. When he arrived at Beit El, Jacob took 12 stones from the altar where his father Isaac had been bound by Abraham, and he placed them under his head and fell asleep. In the morning, Jacob awoke and went to gather up the stones that he had used as a pillow in order to put them back in the altar. To his surprise, he found that all of the stones had become one stone. So he set the stone up as a pillar to commemorate his dream. What did God then do? God sank the stone deep into the earth as one inserts a keystone into an arch. Therefore, this pillar is called Even Shtiyah, the foundation stone from which emerged the entire world. The Midrash connects Jacob's temple of Beit El to the site where Abraham offered up Isaac, the place, as our tradition teaches, that the temple, Beit HaMikdash, was built. But the Midrash also offers this more powerful teaching. In a temple, the next generation of a family, Jacob, reworks the elements of his father's and his grandfather's temple, and it is with his pillar, with Jacob's innovation, that God creates the world. From the repurposed stones of a temple, the world was created. Beit El, Beit HaMikdash, the world, all were formed from the same stones. In 1958, a group of reality-based dreamers, descendants of Jacob, you know many of them by name, the founders of our congregation, chose to purchase these 9 acres in Los Altos Hills. Here, they laid the foundation stone for the building in which many of us have gathered on this evening. And I do not know if they could have foreseen what has now unfolded in this valley during the past decades. But every day when I arrive on our campus, I am grateful that the founders of Beth Am possess the confidence to invest in an uncertain future. As a result of their risk-taking and of our location here in Silicon Valley, Beth Am stands at the epicenter of a new world, a world of bold promise, great challenge, and incredible uncertainty. Helpfully, remarkably, our congregants, many of you, are the builders of this new world. Many of us possess the knowledge of the largely unseen infrastructure and algorithms that increasingly order our lives. And it is this confluence of people and place, of where we are and of who we are, that signals an on-ramp to a new leadership role for our congregation. We hold the responsibility to envision what it means to be a Reformed community in this new world. What is the Torah that we should teach to our children so that they may thrive? How might we evolve our pursuit of tzedek to respond to the justice issues of this time? How might we innovate new rituals that both harness technology's benefits and heal technology's harm? More than any other Reformed synagogue in America, we, Beth Am, we possess the capacity to meet these challenges. And what we next need to do is dream. As I shared with you at the congregational meeting on that Sunday in the before times, to build the sanctuary of which I dream requires sweat equity. It requires the welding of an infrastructure of cross-generational relationships, mutual trust between participants and professionals, and, when necessary, the willingness of a congregation to repurpose the stones of a beloved synagogue into a sanctuary of blessing for a new era. But perhaps the greatest challenge, the overarching challenge to this construction project, is the task of articulation or re-articulation of the risks and rewards, the blessings that emerge from committing to our covenant in this age of unparalleled choice. This is not a new challenge. It's as old as Jacob. When Jacob dreamed in his temple, he dreamed of a sulam. It's a sulam. A sulam is not a ladder. It's more likely a ramp. And the base of Jacob's ramp was mutzav arza, firmly established on the ground, v'rosho magia hashamayma, with its top reaching towards the sky. I call the synagogue that we are innovating together a sanctuary for imperfect practice. But we may also conceive of it as a sulam, as an upward spiral of existence, a ramp that we construct as we climb. And the foundations for the sulam that we are building together are our values. What we call here at Beth Am pillars: worship and spiritual living, lifelong learning, acting as a caring and welcoming community, and the pursuit of tzedek, of acts of justice and service. We have labeled these values our pillars, but I consider them bedrock. They are our even shtiyah. So let us dream, and let us build, and may we create together a sacred space for risk and innovation, a sanctuary of profound blessing for a new generation of dreamers. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.